And we are live. Hello and welcome to Talkin Doctrine, and thank you for joining us for the Talkin Doctrine watch party. Tonight we're just going to watch a short documentary together. It's called Money as Debt. So AS, Money as Debt. And if I would also suggest that if you look for it by itself on YouTube, look for the one that is like 47 minutes. There's a few out there where they've added some things, but look for the one 47 minutes and you'll get the original. And that's what we're going to watch today together. And on the subtitle here, I put the real reason this election does not matter. And notice I put a S for selection, because every president has been selected. It really hasn't changed one bit. And yes, it is a little documentary to explain why, with this election, they have everybody sitting on the edge of their seat, wondering what's going on, really getting pulled in to the drama that's being played out. And they're doing a good job. I gotta say, they're doing a good job. And it goes all the way back to the pandemic that we've been dealing with. Because in order to get us on the edge of our seats right now, they would have to have this mail-in ballot dilemma. And the only reason why the mail-in ballot dilemma is valid is because of the Miss Rona that we've come to name the stupid. Well, I'll just leave her alone. But if you go back to the episode we had on Friday, I think it was episode 228, but how to truly take care of your health with Amanda Volmar. You guys need to go back and watch that if you haven't. It'll help explain why this pandemic, the medical, the natural abilities of our bodies to heal, and really what a virus and bacteria even are. We just scratched the surface on a lot of topics, so you should really go back and check that out. And we got a troll in there, so I think I know who it is. So I think it's Thick Shades. So good to see you, Sam. But no need to troll our chat room. But if it's not Thick Shades, then I do apologize. Whoever you are, you shouldn't be trolling our chat room either. And if it's not Thick Shades, then sorry for the accusation. So back to the topic at hand. With this whole drama that's playing out, the pandemic, they've had this scheduled for a while. They've known what they were going to do for a while. They've been foreshadowing. They have to do that. If anybody understands the Kabbalistic ways, the black magic, the way that they have to tell everybody what they're going to do in order to be able to even do what they're trying to do. They'll have to come up against spiritual battles that they just don't want to come against, the good angels. So in order to get around that, they can just tell everybody what they're doing, but they do it in humor or in foreshadowings, and it's just the way they do things. If you look into it, it's easily documented. So easy to find all the different things. You just have to put a little research into it. But so the whole thing with Trump, I have little doubt that he's not going to remain president. I think that it's all just a big show. They're going to win in the courts, and that's going to cause more drama in the streets. And so, yeah, I just see it all playing out for causing as much chaos and getting as much people strapped in to the show as they can. However, if they've got people on the edge of their seats, they're waiting to see what's going to happen next, and they're not even seeking after the living God who's drawing them from within. Because the show of the world, nobody's bored anymore. That's another reason why kids are always on the games, get their attention, keep them distracted. But that's what's going on right now. And one reason why I can prove it to you is because if Trump was really to do good for the country, he would focus on our monetary system. But I think Trump's part of the next agenda. There's been two factions that we've been dealing with the past couple years. One major faction the past several decades. That would be the New World Order that people have heard of. Oh, conspiracy theories. But no, it's the world system that Satan's running, but doing it in what they would consider dark, immoral, doing it through evil methods of kidnapping, abduction, child trafficking, human trafficking, through drugs. I mean, they do all sorts of different things to keep people stuck in this system that they're setting up, and they've been around for a while. Everyone's focus is on that, the New World Order. But there's going to be a one world order that's fighting against the New World Order. The one world order likes to come in light and goodness and to be moral. They're going to expose the New World Order for what they've been doing over these past several decades, even hundreds of years, and bring in this sort of false utopia. But it's going to be a battle between the orders. It's going to be a battle between these kingdoms. But Satan's pulling all the strings, and the whole purpose to have the left wing and right wing of one bird in the political system, but also in this spiritual that we're dealing with, is to keep people's attention from what's really coming. Because we're given a guidebook, we're given a roadmap of exactly what's going to happen. And we can see those things playing out if you connect world events to what Scripture says. But I don't think Trump, they're done with him. I think that he's part of the one world, the light faction. And the things that have been being set up with him, I don't think are done. So I have little doubt that he's going to stay in there just from the world stage and what I see playing out. I know a lot of people who are godly want Trump to win, and I get it. Makes sense. But that's what the one world is going to do. It's going to make people think that they're good and moral, and this is the way that we should do it, and get rid of the bad and the old that we all already hate. So, and out of the one world, eventually, I don't know exactly when, out of that system will be what the Antichrist comes out of. So, when I was newly saved and realizing all the different things that were going on, one of the reasons that made me realize that there was a world faction, a control, a cage without us even knowing we've got bars around us, was when I learned about the Federal Reserve and our monetary system. And in fact, it's been 10 years, but back in 2010, I ran for state representative in my local area, and I was campaigning on 3 things. One was I wanted to make Florida an open carry state. I said The second one was make Florida abolish abortions in Florida. I said make them illegal. They can go to the neighboring states. Go ahead, drive out there if you want to, but to do that in Florida, it would be illegal. So that was another one, and the third one was to introduce a currency that was based on the silver, like it used to be, on raw materials that basically the Constitution coined, but have a state currency that could compete with the Federal Reserve, and that would, as the currencies deplete, at least the state would be protected financially from the attacks of the fiat currency. And so that's what we're going to learn about tonight. We're going to learn about how money has changed from what we think it is into something totally different. Well, debt. And without debt, we wouldn't have any money to circulate around. And it's very interesting, and also seems intricate and difficult, but when you really break it down, it's quite simple. It's a big hoodwink that these families, that these people, that these elite, the reason why the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil, how they've been able to really put a control, and it's spiritual, as in the cage without bars is a way for the world system to hold us in. But one of the ways, the main way that they've been able to do that is through our monetary systems. And why our forefathers, when they gave us the republic and told us we could keep it, we could have it as long as we could keep it, that they also coined money for that very purpose, because history shows that that empires and republics get destroyed from within, and usually through the monetary system. So before we get into a chat, let's watch this. It's only about 47 minutes. I may pause it, but we might just keep it full all the way through. But really, it's rudimentary, elementary. If you really just use your common sense and see the system that they've set up, it's going to fall on its face. We're already living on borrowed time. If you really look into this and understand what quantitative easing was back in the Obama days, like QE1, QE2, QE3, we're now on QE4, but nobody talks about it because instead of having an end to it, they made it indefinite. So they've just been doing the same thing since QE4. It's quantitative easing 4. And that's just borrowed time. And what Satan has done is connected all the world currencies to the petrodollar. And so when they crash the dollar, like dominoes, it's going to have that effect all across the world. And so out of those ashes, when they crash the dollar, that's where the Antichrist system is going to come out with the cashless society. So we see it all being set up. Is it going to happen in our lifetime? It sure seems like it, but does any of us know? No, we don't. But instead of being on the edge of our seats wondering which selection they're actually going to make, why is it that our system's going to fall no matter what? And that reason is because of what they've set up, this house of cards. So let's watch that. And the reason why I say if Trump, he's been in there for 4 years, he's touched on the Federal Reserve. But if he truly was, and he knows finance, he knows what I'm talking about, he knows what we're about to learn. If he truly was for the people, for good, that would have been taken care of first and foremost. What happened on Jekyll Island in 1912, and then pushed through when the legislation was home for Christmas with just a few people on the floor, the 13th Amendment, never was ratified, by the way, but the gave them the ability to do what they're doing all the way down. So if you look into it, this attack on our freedoms, on our liberties, that is against what was given to us as a republic. We're not a democracy. And if you don't know the difference between a republic and democracy, that's because they don't want you to. But we are a republic here in America, only if we can keep it. But really we are. I hate admitting that, but since 1870, with the legislation, we've turned into a democracy. But we can shift it back the way that it should be, go back to republic. Otherwise, we're heading to oligarchy, which that's pretty much what we're in right now without people knowing. So let's get into the video. And after we watch this together, we'll have a conversation. If you guys if you have any questions that you really want me to address during the video, put them in all caps, and I'll see it. And I can pause and we can talk about it real quick, but only if you think it's very important, if you miss something. Otherwise, write it down and keep it for the end, and we can have a discussion about it. But and Marble Water, you hit the nail on the head. Oh, you know what? I don't know if I didn't set up the chat room. Hold on, guys. Let me do this real quick. Let me set this up. Oh, sorry. Should have done this earlier. And then alright. So it is buffering a little bit, so I do apologize. I see that. Lord willing, it'll fix itself really soon. And hopefully that'll work. So let me see. There we go. Alright. So, I did all that because I want to highlight what Marble Water put here. Democracy means mob rule. Republic means the individual. And those are Latin terms, and it doesn't mean mob rule, but rule of many. And then rule of one are the Latin terms. But it protects the individual, especially from mob rule, especially from the republic is supposed to protect us from things like democracies, which everyone claims, and they think that we're a democracy now. So, when it comes down to it, but it's only a facade, because that's why if we were a democracy, then the president would be elected. But when you look at truly our history and how every single president is related, except for maybe one or two, all of them are related, to the point to where you realize they're not elected but selected. So when you realize that, makes sense when the Bible says, "In whom the God of this world had blinded the minds of them that believe not." Who's the God of this world in that passage? 2 Corinthians 4 or 2 Corinthians 11, one of the two. But that's a lowercase g talking about Satan. He's the God of this world. And so when you realize exactly how everything's a lie, and the only thing in this world that's true, 100% truth in this world, is the Bible itself, everything starts making a lot more sense. All the different things you see in the world. So let's go ahead and put the video up. Okay, hold on. Let's see. Alright. Oh, hold on a second. Okay. Yeah, here. Alright, there it is. I couldn't find where the video was. I knew I had it somewhere. Alright. So we'll watch this together, and then, like I said, we'll have a little discussion afterwards. Alright. Without further ado, let's give it a go.
Explored in stories, songs.
It's coming.
Two great mysteries dominate our lives, love and money. What is love is a question that has been endlessly explored in stories, songs, books, movies, and television. But the same cannot be said about the question, what is money? It's not surprising that monetary theory hasn't inspired any blockbuster movies, but it was not even mentioned at the schools most of us attended. For most of us, the question, where does money come from, brings to mind a picture of the mint printing bills and stamping coins. Money, most of us believe, is created by the government. It's true, but only to a point. Those metal and paper symbols of value we usually think of as money are indeed produced by an agency of the federal government called the Mint. But the vast majority of money is not created by the Mint. It is created in huge amounts every day by private corporations known as banks. Most of us believe that banks lend out money that has been entrusted to them by depositors. Easy to picture, but not the truth. In fact, banks create the money they loan, not from the bank's own earnings, not from the money deposited, but directly from the borrower's promise to repay. The borrower's signature on the loan papers is an obligation to pay the bank the amount of the loan plus interest, or lose the house, the car, whatever asset was pledged as collateral. That's a big commitment from the borrower. What does the same signature require of the bank? The bank gets to conjure into existence the amount of the loan and just write it into the borrower's account. Sound far-fetched? Surely that can't be true. But it is. To demonstrate how this miracle of modern banking came about, consider this simple story, the goldsmith's tale. Once upon various times, pretty much anything was used as money. It just had to be portable, and enough people had to have faith that it could later be exchanged for things of real value, like food, clothing, and shelter. Shells, cocoa beans, pretty stones, even feathers have been used as money. Gold and silver were attractive, soft, and easy to work with, so some cultures became expert with these metals. Goldsmiths made trade much easier by casting coins, standardized units of these metals whose weight and purity was certified. Well, to protect his gold, the goldsmith needed a vault, and soon his fellow townsmen were knocking on his door, wanting to rent space to safeguard their own coins and valuables. Before long, the goldsmith was renting every shelf in the vault and earning a small income from his vault rental business. Years went by, and the goldsmith made an astute observation. Depositors rarely came in to remove their actual physical gold, and they never all came in at once. That was because the claim checks the goldsmith had written as receipts for the gold were being traded in the marketplace as if they were the gold itself. This paper money was far more convenient than heavy coins, and amounts could simply be written instead of laboriously counted one by one for each transaction. Meanwhile, the goldsmith had another business. He lent out his gold, charging interest. Well, as convenient claim check money came into acceptance, borrowers began asking for their loans in the form of these claim checks instead of the actual metal. As industry expanded, more and more people asked the goldsmith for loans. This gave the goldsmith an even better idea. He knew that very few of his depositors ever removed their actual gold, so the goldsmith figured he could easily get away with lending out claim checks against his depositors' gold, in addition to his own. As long as the loans were repaid, his depositors would be none the wiser and no worse off, and the goldsmith, now more banker than artisan, would make a far greater profit than he could by lending only his own gold. For years, the goldsmith secretly enjoyed a good income from the interest earned on everybody else's deposits. Now a prominent lender, he grew steadily richer than his fellow townsmen, and he flaunted it. Suspicions grew that he was spending his depositors' money. His depositors got together and threatened withdrawal of their gold if the goldsmith didn't come clean about his newfound wealth. Contrary to what one might expect, this did not turn out to be a disaster for the goldsmith. Despite the duplicity inherent in his scheme, his idea did work. The depositors had not lost anything. Their gold was all safe in the goldsmith's vault. Well, rather than taking back their gold, the depositors demanded that the goldsmith, now their banker, cut them in by paying them a share of the interest. And that was the beginning of banking. The banker paid a low interest rate on deposits of other people's money that he then loaned out at a higher interest. The difference covered the bank's cost of operation and its profit. The logic of this system was simple, and it seemed like a reasonable way to satisfy the demand for credit. However, this is not the way banking works today. Our goldsmith banker was not content with the income remaining after sharing the interest earnings with his depositors, and the demand for credit was growing fast as Europeans spread out across the world. But his loans were limited by the amount of gold his depositors had in his vault. That's when he got an even bolder idea. Since no one but himself knew what was actually in his vaults, he could lend out claim checks on gold that wasn't even there. As long as all the claim check holders didn't come to the vault at the same time and demand real gold, how would anyone find out? This new scheme worked very well, and the banker became enormously wealthy on the interest paid on gold that did not exist. The idea that the banker would just create money out of nothing was too outrageous to believe, so for a long time the thought did not occur to people. But the power to just invent money went to the banker's head, as you can well imagine. In time, the magnitude of the banker's loans and his ostentatious wealth did trigger suspicions once again. Some borrowers started to demand real gold instead of paper representations. Rumors spread. Suddenly, several wealthy depositors showed up to remove their gold. The game was up. A sea of claim check holders flooded the street outside the closed doors of the bank. Alas, the banker did not have enough gold and silver to redeem all the paper he had put into their hands. This is called a run on the bank, and it is what every banker dreads. This phenomenon of a run on the bank ruined individual banks and, not surprisingly, damaged public confidence in all bankers. It would have been straightforward to outlaw the practice of creating money from nothing. But the large volumes of credit the bankers were offering had become essential to the success of European commercial expansion, so instead the practice was legalized and regulated. Bankers agreed to abide by limits on the amount of fictional loan money that could be lent out. The limit would still be a number much larger than the actual value of gold and silver in the vault. Quite often the ratio was 9 fictional dollars to 1 actual dollar in gold. These regulations were enforced by surprise inspections. It was also arranged that, in the event of a run, central banks would support local banks with emergency infusions of gold. Only if there were runs on a lot of banks simultaneously would the banker's credit bubble burst and the system come crashing down. Over the years, the fractional reserve system and its integrated network of banks backed by a central bank has become the dominant money system of the world. At the same time, the fraction of gold backing the debt money has steadily shrunk to nothing. The basic nature of money has changed. In the past, a paper dollar was actually a receipt that could be redeemed for a fixed weight of gold or silver. In the present, a paper or digital dollar can only be redeemed for another paper or digital dollar. In the past, privately created bank credit existed only in the form of private banknotes, which people had the choice to refuse, just as we have the choice to refuse someone's private check today. In the present, privately created bank credit is legally convertible to government-issued fiat currency, the dollars, loonies, and pounds we habitually think of as money. Fiat currency is money created by government fiat or decree, and legal tender laws declare that citizens must accept this fiat money as payment for debt, or else the courts will not enforce the obligation. So now the question is, if governments and banks can both just create money, then how much money exists? In the past, the total amount of money in existence was limited to the actual physical quantities of whatever commodity was in use as money. For example, in order for new gold or silver money to be created, more gold or silver had to be found and dug out of the ground. In the present, money is literally created as debt. New money is created whenever anyone takes a loan from the bank. As a result, the total amount of money that can be created has only one real limit: the total level of debt. Governments place an additional statutory limit on the creation of new money by enforcing rules known as fractional reserve requirements. Essentially arbitrary, fractional reserve requirements vary from country to country and from time to time. In the past, it was common to require banks to have at least $1 worth of real gold in the vault to back $10 worth of debt money created. Today, reserve requirement ratios no longer apply to the ratio of new money to gold on deposit, but merely to the ratio of new debt money to existing debt money on deposit in the bank. Today, a bank's reserves consist of two things: the amount of government-issued cash or equivalent that the bank has deposited with the central bank, plus the amount of already existing debt money the bank has on deposit. To illustrate this in a simple way, let's imagine that a new bank has just started up and has no depositors yet. However, the bank's investors have made a reserve deposit of $1,111.12, of existing cash money at the central bank. The required reserve ratio is 9 to 1. Step 1. The door is open and the new bank welcomes its first loan customer. He needs $10,000 to buy a car. At the 9 to 1 reserve ratio, the new bank's reserve at the central bank, also known as high-powered money, allows it to legally conjure into existence 9 times that amount, or $10,000, on the basis of the borrower's pledge of debt. This $10,000 is not taken from anywhere. It's brand new money simply typed into the borrower's account as bank credit. The borrower then writes a check on that bank credit to buy the used car. Step 2. The seller then deposits this newly created $10,000 at her bank. Unlike the high-powered government money deposited at the central bank, this newly created credit money cannot be multiplied by the reserve ratio. Instead, it's divided by the reserve ratio. At a ratio of 9 to 1, a new loan of $9,000 can be created on the basis of the $10,000 deposit. Step 3. If that $9,000 is then deposited by a third party at the same bank that created it or at a different one, it becomes the legal basis for a third issue of bank credit, this time for the amount of $8,100. Like one of those Russian dolls where each layer contains a slightly smaller doll inside, each new deposit contains the potential for a slightly smaller loan in an infinitely decreasing series. Now, if the loan money created is not deposited at the bank, the process stops. That's the unpredictable part of the money creation mechanism. But more likely, at every step, the new money will be deposited at a bank, and the reserve ratio process can repeat itself over and over until almost $100,000 of brand new money has been created within the banking system. All of this new money has been created entirely from debt, and the whole process has been legally authorized by the initial reserve deposit of just $1,111.12, which is still sitting untouched at the central bank. What's more, under this ingenious system, the books of each bank in the chain must show that the bank has 10% more on deposit than it has out on loan. This gives banks a very real incentive to seek deposits in order to be able to make loans, supporting the general but misleading impression that loans come out of deposits. Now, unless all the successive loans are deposited at the same bank, it cannot be said that any one bank got to multiply its initial high-powered money reserve almost 90 times by issuing bank credit out of nothing. However, the banking system is a closed loop. Bank credit created at one bank becomes a deposit in another, and vice versa. In a theoretical world of perfectly equal exchanges, the ultimate effect would be exactly the same as if the whole process took place within one bank. That is, the bank's initial central bank reserve of a little over $1,100 allows it to ultimately collect interest on up to $100,000 the bank never had. If that sounds ridiculous, try this. In recent decades, as a result of steady lobbying by the banks, the requirements to make a reserve deposit at the nation's central bank have all but disappeared in some countries, and actual reserve ratios can be much higher than 9 to 1. For some types of accounts, 20 to 1 and 30 to 1 ratios are common. And even more recently, by using loan fees to raise the required reserve from the borrower, banks have now found a way to circumvent reserve requirement limitations entirely. So, while the rules are complex, the common sense reality is actually quite simple. Banks can create as much money as we can borrow. Despite the endlessly presented mint footage, government-created money typically accounts for less than 5% of the money in circulation. More than 95% of all money in existence today was created by someone signing a pledge of indebtedness to a bank. What's more, this bank credit money is being created and destroyed in huge amounts every day as new loans are made and old ones repaid. Banks can only practice this money system with the active cooperation of government. First, governments pass legal tender laws to make us use the national fiat currency. Secondly, governments allow private bank credit to be paid out in this government currency. Thirdly, government courts enforce debts. And lastly, governments pass regulations to protect the money system's functionality and credibility with the public, while doing nothing to inform the public about where money really comes from. The simple truth is that when we sign on the dotted line for a so-called loan or mortgage, our signed pledge of payment, backed by the assets we pledge to forfeit should we fail to pay, is the only thing of real value involved in the transaction. To anyone who believes we will honor our pledge, that loan agreement or mortgage is now a portable, exchangeable, and saleable piece of paper. It's an IOU. It represents value and is therefore a form of money. This money the borrower exchanges for the bank's so-called loan. Now, a loan in the real world means that the lender must have something to lend. If you need a hammer, my loaning you a promise to provide a hammer I don't have won't be of much help. But in the artificial world of money, a bank's promise to pay money it doesn't have is allowed to be passed off as money, and we accept it as such. Once the borrower signs the pledge of debt, the bank then balances the transaction by creating, with a few keystrokes on a computer, a matching debt of the bank to the borrower. From the borrower's point of view, this becomes loan money in his or her account, and because the government allows this debt of the bank to the borrower to be converted to government fiat currency, everyone has to accept it as money. Again, the basic truth is very simple. Without the document the borrower signed, the banker would have nothing to lend. Have you ever wondered how everyone, governments, corporations, small businesses, families, can all be in debt at the same time and for such astronomical amounts? Have you ever questioned how there can be that much money out there to lend? Now you know. There isn't. Banks do not lend money. They simply create it from debt. And as debt is potentially unlimited, so is the supply of money. And as it turns out, the opposite situation is also true. Isn't it astounding that despite the incredible wealth of resources, innovation, and productivity that surrounds us, almost all of us, from governments to companies to individuals, are heavily in debt to bankers? If only people would stop and think, how can that be? How can it be that the people who actually produce all the real wealth in the world are in debt to those who merely lend out the money that represents the wealth? Even more amazing is that once we realize that money really is debt, we realize that if there was no debt, there'd be no money. If this is news to you, you are not alone. Most people imagine that if all debts were paid off, the state of the economy would improve. It's certainly true on an individual level. Just as we have more money to spend when our loan payments are finished, we think that if everyone were out of debt, there would be more money to spend in general. But the truth is the exact opposite. There would be no money at all. There it is. We are totally dependent on continually renewed bank credit for there to be any money in existence. No loans, no money, which is what happened during the Great Depression. The money supply shrank drastically as the supply of loans dried up. And that's not all. Banks create only the amount of the principal. They don't create the money to pay the interest. Where is that supposed to come from? The only place borrowers can go to obtain the money to pay interest is the general economy's overall money supply. But almost all that overall money supply has been created exactly the same way, as bank credit that has to be paid back with more than was created. So everywhere there are other borrowers in the same situation, frantically trying to obtain the money they need to pay back both principal and interest from a total money pool which contains only principal. It is clearly impossible for everyone to pay back the principal plus interest because the interest money doesn't exist. This can even be expressed by a simple mathematical formula. The big problem here is that for long-term loans such as mortgages and government debt, the total interest far exceeds the principal. So unless a lot of extra money is created to pay the interest, it means a very high proportion of foreclosures and a non-functioning economy. To maintain a functional society, the rate of foreclosure needs to be low. And so, to accomplish this, more and more new debt money has to be created to satisfy today's demands for money to service the previous debt. But of course, this just makes the total debt bigger, and that means more interest must ultimately be paid, resulting in an ever-escalating and inescapable spiral of mounting indebtedness. It is only the time lag between money's creation as new loans and its repayment that keeps the overall shortage of money from catching up and bankrupting the entire system. However, as the bank's insatiable credit monster gets bigger and bigger, the need to create more and more debt money to feed it becomes increasingly urgent. Why are interest rates so low? Why do we get unsolicited credit cards in the mail? Why is the U.S. government spending faster than ever? Could it be to stave off collapse of the entire monetary system? A rational person has to ask, can this really go on forever? Isn't a collapse inevitable? Money facilitates production and trade. As the money supply increases, money just becomes increasingly worthless unless the volume of production and trade in the real world grows by the same amount. Add to this the realization that when we hear that the economy is growing at 3% per year, it sounds like a constant rate, but it's not. This year's 3% represents more real goods and services than last year's 3% because it's 3% of the new total. Instead of a straight line, as is naturally visualized from the words, it is really an exponential curve getting steeper and steeper. The problem, of course, is that perpetual growth of the real economy requires perpetually escalating use of real-world resources and energy. More and more stuff has to go from natural resource to garbage every year, forever, just to keep this system from collapsing. What can we do about this downright scary situation? For one thing, we need a very different concept of money. It's time more people asked themselves and their governments 4 simple questions. Around the world, governments borrow money at interest from private banks. Government debt is a major component of total debt, and servicing that debt takes a big chunk of our taxes. Now we know that banks simply create the money they lend, and that governments have given them permission to do this. So the first question is, why do governments choose to borrow money from private banks at interest when government could create all the interest-free money it needs itself? And the second big question is, why create money as debt at all? Why not create money that circulates permanently and doesn't have to be perpetually reborrowed at interest in order to exist? The third question, how can a money system that can only function with perpetually accelerating growth be used to build a sustainable economy? Isn't it logical that perpetually accelerating growth and sustainability are incompatible? And finally, what is it about our current system that makes it totally dependent on perpetual growth? What needs to be changed to allow the creation of a sustainable economy? At one time, charging any interest on a loan was called usury and was subject to severe penalties, including death. Every major religion forbade usury. Most of the arguments made against the practice were moral. It was held that money's only legitimate purpose was to facilitate the exchange of real goods and services. Any form of making money from simply having money was regarded as the act of a parasite or of a thief. However, as the credit needs of commerce increased, the moral arguments eventually gave way to the argument that lending involves risk and loss of opportunity to the lender, and therefore attempting to make a profit from lending is justified. Today, these notions seem quaint. Today, the idea of making money from money is held as an ideal to strive for. Why work when you can get your money to work for you? However, in trying to envision a sustainable future, it's very clear that the charging of interest is both a moral and a practical problem. Imagine a society and economy that can endure for centuries because, instead of plundering its capital stores of energy, it restricts itself to present-day income. No more wood is harvested than grows in the same period. All energy is renewable, solar, gravitational, geothermal, magnetic, and whatever else we discover. This society lives within the limits of its non-renewable resources by reusing and recycling everything, and the population just replaces itself. Such a society could never function using a money system utterly dependent on perpetually accelerating growth. A stable economy would need a money supply at least capable of remaining stable without collapsing. Let's say the total volume of this stable money supply is represented by this big circle. Let's also imagine that moneylenders must actually have existing money to lend. If some people within this money supply begin systematically lending money at interest, their share of the money supply will grow. If they continually re-loan at interest all the money that gets paid back, what's the inevitable result? Whether it's gold, fiat, or debt money doesn't matter. The moneylenders will end up with all the money. And after the foreclosures and bankruptcies are all filed, they'll get all the real property too. Only if the proceeds of lending at interest were evenly distributed among the population would this central problem be solved. Heavy taxation of bank profits might accomplish this goal, but then why would banks want to be in business? If we were ever able to free ourselves of the current situation, we could imagine banking run as a non-profit service to society, dispersing its interest earnings as a universal citizen dividend, or lending without charging interest at all. If it is the fundamental nature of the system that causes the problems, tinkering with the system cannot ever solve those problems. The system itself must be replaced. Many monetary critics call for a return to gold-based money, claiming that gold has a long history of reliability. They ignore the many scams that can be played with gold, shaving coins, debasing the metal, cornering the market, all of which were abundantly practiced in ancient Rome and contributed to its fall. Some advocate silver, it being more abundant than gold and therefore more difficult to corner. Many question the need to bring back precious metals at all. No one wants to go back to carrying heavy sacks of coins to go shopping. It's a certainty that paper, digital, plastic, or more likely biometric ID money would be the real medium of trade, with the same potential for creating unlimited debt money we have now. Beyond that, if gold again became the sole legal basis of money, those who have no gold would suddenly have no money. Other monetary reform advocates have concluded that greed and dishonesty are the main problems, and that there may be better ways to create an honest and equitable money system than returning to silver or gold. Inventive minds have proposed a variety of alternate ways to create money. Many private barter systems create money as debt, much as banks do, but it is done openly and without charging interest. An example is a barter system in which debt is expressed as pledges of hours of work, all work being valued equally at a dollar figure that then allows hours to be equated with the dollar price of goods. This kind of money system can be set up by anyone who can devise a way to do the accounting and find willing and trustworthy participants. Setting up a local barter money system, even if it were little used now, would be prudent emergency planning for any community. Monetary reform, like electoral reform, is a big topic, and one that requires a willingness to change and to think outside the box. Monetary reform, again, like electoral reform, will not come easily, because the enormously powerful interests that benefit from the existing system will do their utmost to maintain their advantage. Now that we've seen that money is just an idea, and that in reality money can be whatever we make it, here's one very simple alternative monetary concept to consider. This model is based on systems that have worked in the past, in England and America, systems that were undermined and destroyed by the goldsmith bankers and their fractional reserve system. To create an economy based on permanent interest-free money, money could simply be created and spent into the economy by the government, preferably on long-lasting infrastructure that facilitates the economy, such as roads, railroads, bridges, harbors, and public markets. This money would not be created as debt, it would be created as value, that value being in the form of whatever it was spent on. If this new money facilitated a proportional increase in trade requiring its use, it would cause no inflation whatsoever. If government spending did cause inflation, there would be two courses of action available. Inflation is equivalent in effect to a flat tax on money. Whether the money goes down in value 20% or the government takes 20% of our money away from us, the effect on our buying power is the same. Viewed this way, inflation in place of taxation might be politically acceptable if well spent and kept within limits. Or government could choose to counter inflation by collecting tax monies that it then takes out of use, thus reducing the money supply and restoring its value. To control deflation, which is the phenomenon of falling wages and prices, the government would simply spend more money into existence. With no competing private debt money creation, governments would have more effective control of their nation's money supply. The public would know whom to blame if things went wrong. Governments would rise and fall on their ability to preserve the value of money. Government would operate primarily on taxes, as it does now, but tax money would go much, much further, as none of it would be required to pay interest to private bankers. There could be no national debt if the federal government simply created the money it needed. Our perpetual collective servitude to the banks through interest payments on government debt would be impossible. What we have been taught to believe is democracy and freedom has become in reality an ingenious and invisible form of economic dictatorship. As long as our entire society remains utterly dependent on bank credit for its supply of money, bankers will be in the position to make the decisions on who gets the money they need and who doesn't. Few people are aware today that the history of the United States since the Revolution in 1776 has been, in large part, the story of an epic struggle to get free and stay free of control by the European international banks. This struggle was finally lost in 1913 when President Woodrow Wilson signed into effect the Federal Reserve Act, putting the international banking cartel in charge of creating America's money. The power of this system is deeply ingrained. So is the educational and media silence on the subject. Years ago, a Canadian Deputy Prime Minister surveyed scores of non-economists, both highly educated professionals and common-sense people on the street, and found that not one of them had an accurate understanding of how money is created. In fact, it's probably safe to say that most people, including the frontline employees of banks, have never given the matter a moment's thought. Have you? The modern money-as-debt system was born a little over 300 years ago, when the first Bank of England was set up with a royal charter for fractional lending of gold receipts at a modest ratio of 2-to-1. That modest ratio was just the proverbial foot in the door. The system is now worldwide, creates virtually unlimited amounts of money out of thin air, and has almost everyone on the planet chained to a perpetually growing debt that can never be paid off. Could it have all happened by accident? Or is it a conspiracy? Obviously, something very big is at stake here.
right, so that was awesome. And I will put the link also in the description. Paula, thank you for posting it. And like I said earlier, if you just put money as debt, and they also had a part 2, but it wasn't quite as informative as this one. But it is very important to understand and see what's going on. And Marvel Water says, I'm amazed by the quotes I've never heard. Our predecessors were a lot more aware than I thought. And that's what about the quote of if you don't know your history, it's bound to repeat itself. And so that's so true. And there's so many things to understand about what's going on. They're doing this on purpose. Trump has been in a place to where he knows this. This isn't. It's only not known to us pawns. The elite, especially billionaires, absolutely know what's going on. And so with this, Trump could have already put a currency in place that was just free from the Federal Reserve, the private bank in which we borrow our money from. And there were some key points in there, and how they, enslave us without letting us even see the prison walls in which we're in. John, that's a great point. They didn't have the internet. And they did a lot, as much as they could do back then. Now it's up to us to research where they left it, because it's not going to be promoted or put in places that are easily found. Hey, Hash. Well, if you don't know what history has done, it's going to kick you again. That's what the problem is. People who don't know what's happened in the past are prone to fall for the same tricks from the future, or in the future, which blows the conspiracy theorists out of the water that the founders were colonized masonry blue-eyed devils. Not all of them were, but there were definitely some that were part of the occult. Not all of them. That was part of the best way to hide it, is behind the truth of good men. Same way they do today. There's good people in those secret societies who have no clue how evil the higher echelon is. So, but the fact that we're fighting against each other, against the pool to get our portion of the pool of money to pay back our debts, and there's no interest in that pool. So no matter if everybody is fiscally responsible and paid back all their debt, some people would have foreclosures, repossessions, and bankruptcies, and there would be no money in circulation. That's why this whole thing, the national debt, we have to lower the national debt. There's no way to lower the national debt unless you start restricting the money supply to pay it off. And so, and then when you put interest in the middle, then the fact that we're borrowing the money from these people, these private entities, at interest, but not only that, they have full reign of their machines, and they can dilute, water down our money supply by just giving themselves. They don't even need the interest. They can just print it. So, knowing how Satan is doing this, there's really nothing we can do about it. We're stuck in the system. There's no way that this is going to change unless we had somebody in the presidency that was actually gonna do something that would benefit us and not perpetuate us or keep us going towards the one world government, one world currency, one world religion. It's just they're going to do it in a way that is going to look good, happy, fluffy, and exposing the evil that's been going on for the past several decades and centuries. So, Peter Schiff. Well, that's did you notice, they're pushing debt. The whole I saw a comment in there earlier about student loans. That was one way that they could put a shock to the economy, is to pay for everybody's college. Like, they just have to find ways to inject cash. That's why right now interest rates are at 0. But they also have QE4. This video was made long before they got into quantitative easing, which basically the part where it was talking about the money owed compared to the money in circulation over time just gets enormously different. There's a huge difference between them. And so the quantitative easing is them injecting just made up cash right into the system to try to close that gap. But what it does by default, without being able to do anything about it, it dilutes the value or reduces the value of the money that people saved. So think about somebody who worked really hard 20 years ago to save $100,000, and they've been able to live off of pennies and keep that $100,000 in the bank the whole time. Well, back then, with $100,000, they could have bought, not a mansion, but a really nice house. If just 20 years ago, if they would have spent that $100,000, they could have had at least a 500 or 5,000 square foot house. Where today, if they held on to it and just waited and they got the interest for it, and their interest would come out to be like their interest would be like $20,000 at the most after 20 years, and they'd have $120,000, but they couldn't even purchase a starter home. A starter home is like a 18 to 20,000, 1,800 to 2,000 square foot house, and those used to go for 10 years ago. Those used to go for about 100,000, but nowadays they're going for no less than 200,000. So if you would have spent the money 20 years ago, that took them, a long time to make, because it was hard to make 100,000 back then. That's why you could get so much for so little. He could have had a house 5,000 square feet. But today, he couldn't even afford half of a 2,000 square foot just by leaving that money in the bank. And the reason why is because the value of the money has gone down. Think about it this way. If you're not making $18 an hour, if you're not making $18 an hour right now, you're not making minimum wage standards And maybe higher, maybe like $20. You're not making a minimum wage standards of 1960. In 1960, the minimum wage was $1.25. But in those 5 quarters was over an ounce of silver. So if today you take and you go and you trade in those 5 quarters, it will give you, about 18 to $20. And that's what they were making every hour back in 1960. We think because minimum wage has gone up to like $10, $8, $12, depending on where you are, that, we've gone up in wage from 1960 because they were only getting $1.25 back then. But because they had real money and our currency was sort of based on sound money, the silver standard wasn't taken out of the coins until 1963. Completely out of the coins, I should say. They incrementally were taking them out before then, but in 1963, they eliminated it completely. But put it to you this way: a gallon of gas has always cost 1/4. So from like 1904 or 5, when they started selling gasoline, till about 1964, a gallon of gas was anywhere between 22 cents and 28 cents. It went up and down depending on where you were. That's about how much it was, and it never changed for close to 75 years. Or wait, no, not 75, 60 years. Not one change. But then, when we got off the gold standard, that's when gas, or got off the coin, got our money off of the gold standard completely. That's when gas started going up and fluctuating, to where if you take an ounce and a quarter of silver and divide that by 5, that will be your gallon price at the pump today. You know how gasoline goes up and down and up and down. It's following actually the currency. It's the petrodollar, and our dollar fluctuates off of the oil, but the gallon pump price really is connected to the commodities and what the value of the currency is. So if you take a silver quarter, and you trade it in, they'll give you about $4 roughly for it, which will buy you a gallon of gas anywhere in the country. Right now, it's, I think, right at $3 where we are. But the money has not changed, or the product has not changed. The value of the money is what's changed over time. So think about, I'm 40, and I remember when you could buy a bottle of Coke at the store for 50 cents. The cans were $0.25. You could buy one of those bottles for 50 cents, the plastic bottles. Then I remember when they went up to 89 cents, and that was a lot. They stayed there for a long time. So basically it stayed like $1. But now you go to a convenience store and you try buying one of those bottled sodas. In just 20 years' times, it's gone over $2. You're spending $2 and change for one of those drinks. And it's the same bottle that I was twisting the cap off 20 years ago. But it's the value of the dollar that's making it cost so much. And they're just doing it on purpose. They needed to turn it into the petrol so that they could put this house of cards together. And when they decide to pull the trigger, they will crash our currency. by restricting. They've done many practices over the years. The last major one that we know of that we've dealt with was back in the 20s and 30s. But when they restrict interest rates, when you start hearing them talking about interest rates are going up, or that they're not allowing, or interest, the banks are not lending, when they do that, we're going to have weeks, maybe months, but probably weeks before the whole system comes crashing down. So that's a little bit of warning. Hopefully we're not going to hear that for quite some time, hopefully years from now. But when you start hearing the narrative in the news, that they are restricting credit, restricting loans, like they were testing the waters in 2008, that's when they're starting to pull the trigger. So know that it's nothing to be afraid of. God said it's going to happen. And if it does happen in our lifetime, praise God that we get to be part of the last generation, and know that God's going to provide even when there's no buying or selling going on without their one world digital currency. God's going to provide our needs, just like he said he would, just like the examples he gives us in Scripture. So there's nothing to fear. But fear itself, just kidding. Fear God. Know he's going to guide us and keep us to whatever end brings him the most glory. So, if you guys did not watch this video, then I would suggest, like I said, the link is in the chat room. We will put it in the description, or you can type in money as debt and grab the 47-minute version of it. With that, I think I'm gonna call it a night and get some work done. Unless you guys have any questions that you want to go over. Let me make sure I didn't miss any. I was not really paying attention to the chat while I went on my little monologue there. Okay, so no, nothing to me. I saw that. Yeah, but I don't think we're gonna deal with that right now. I'm pretty sure that Trump's gonna stay in where he's at. But if not, then my timeline could be messed up. I certainly do see that, and I would imagine that we are much closer than what I would want to really admit if Biden remains what am I saying? If people still think he's president-elect or the president in January. Let's see. I see. Oh, what do you think about JFK and why was he killed? JFK, I don't know. He was selected, and maybe when he got in, he went rogue, because he did give us some warnings. He was making some moves, and he was going to do just that. I think he realized what was going on and was in the process of ending the Federal Reserve behind closed doors. Like, he had different legislation being set up, and it was when they found that out is when I think they decided they had to eliminate him. I think they put him in there because they thought that they could control him because he was a little playboy, but he actually had a conscience for a patriot, for a nation. I hope he actually got saved. That would be really cool to see him in glory when we get there. But from what I remember, I think he was a pretty staunch Catholic. But I do think that they thought that they could control him in that sense, and that they couldn't. And I think that they did the whole grassy knoll thing for multiple reasons. They could have eliminated him not so publicly. But I think if you do some research into what happened there on Elm Street, it's clear that they were setting up things for years to come. So I do think that it was on purpose. Who do I think gave the fatal shot? Actually, I think it was the guy sitting in the passenger seat of the car. I think that there were several shooters, one patsy, and I wouldn't even doubt if the patsy didn't have rounds, because he would have been cross-firing the one that I think the one who made the kill, got the kill, would have been the backstop for the patsy. So I think he just had blanks, loud shoot 'em up boom cartridges, but no pellet, no actual bullets, is my opinion. But I don't really know. Whoa, I click away and I come back. Okay. I also believe he planned on releasing Flat Earth. I thought when I read that, I thought Oswald, because I was just about to say, and how they killed him with that guy, and then you said I think he was planning on releasing. Just ran through my head, but yes, he very well could have been, but I think it was more so what it is we just learned and watched tonight, that the monetary system, just in its workings, in the way that it's set up to fail. And then not only that, it's a system set up to fail in which we spend money to use, which isn't even real money. And you see that point that it gave us in this documentary? It showed us why, when you buy products, they're made to break. That's not by accident. The things that were made back when our money was attached to the gold standard, and it wasn't 100% fiat at that time, the products that were made back then were made to last. It was the things that would last the longest that would sell the most, and people would save up for it. But now they can sell products at a fraction of the cost, but to put the real manufacturers out of business, the real producers out of business, just to give them products that will, in the short term, become null and void, and they'll have to be replaced. And so going from what God gave us to the landfill, it's an attack. It's a spiritual attack that Satan is doing on God's creation through the fiat currency that's been perpetrated, shoved on us for the past 300 years. If you were paying attention, is when it started. And Andrew Jackson, on his epitaph, which that's what's written on his grave, the slogan, the statement that he chose to put on his tombstone, actually reads, "I killed the banks." So these people who knew in our history where the problem truly was coming from, their voice has been silenced by his history. And so 1913 was when they snuck in. 1912 was when they met on Jekyll Island. 1913 is when the legislation got passed. And since then, people don't even wonder, where does money come from? It was a great point that this documentary said, and it should be something to bring up in conversation with others, not only so that they can get informed, but, seeing the deception in this world, brings, when people really understand the currency, it brings the power to this elite few. And why is there this elite few? Well, because they worship the lowercase g God of this world. And so, really, when you really dive into it, not only do they worship the God of this world, they're in cahoots. They have what would be like business meetings with fallen angels and devils to figure out how they're going to perpetrate their lie more and get ready for when, like, they're getting ready for the day of the Lord. They want to attack God, but the day of the Lord is darkness for them. It's going to be glorious for us, but they are preparing and have been preparing and hiding it from us and keeping us trapped and distracted by the love of money, the control of money, the lie of what money is and where it comes from. So, you guys make sure, if you didn't watch the whole thing, watch it back. Tomorrow night, I'll do it. I've got a couple more invitations to make. I may do a response video tomorrow night. Otherwise, we will have another watch party. We're going to watch a few of these documentaries, these things of seeing what's going on in the real world. If we put on our thinking caps and really dive into what's happened before, we can see what's being perpetrated on us now, and at least being aware, G.I. Joe will be happy. Because remember, knowing is half the battle. Now you know, and knowing is half the battle. So if you woke up with Saturday cartoons and you're around my age, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Otherwise, we're just going to be watching it for good information, to be able to open up conversation with others, to help them see that there really is an attack on their health, on their money, on their life, on their mind. And if they can be woken up to that, then hopefully they'll turn and seek Jesus and His Word and want to get to know Him too. So not only are these very informative for us, but I do think that we can use them as quality informational tools to be able to relay to others the reality of the spiritual battles that we're actually in. Because we battle not against flesh and blood. We know that. But the lost and dying world doesn't know that. And if they can see these very real attacks in the physical, then hopefully they'll seek God, and He'll give them the eyes to see that these very same attacks that are going on in the physical are happening to them every day in the spiritual as well. And so I do think that they are beneficial and can be used for multiple reasons. Edifying us, help us, show us the playbook. We're not unaware of the wiles of the devil, and it'll help give us ways to open doors and give people a real sense of what's going on with the spiritual things we want to share with them, and show them how God's Word can answer all the questions they have. Do you have your age? Don't have to be your age. I was at the tall end of that. Right, okay, that's true. And Paula, amen. Truth is stranger than fiction. That's what they don't expect people to realize. But most of the fictional stories that we see, the superheroes and fantastic movies, a lot of their storylines come directly from the Bible, just twisting it a little. And also remember, Satan can't make anything up. He's not creative. All he can do is counterfeit. So when you realize that the things in Scripture are true, not only true, but literal, and you start putting it in the sense of how we, the real world today, and start realizing real soon that truth really is stranger than fiction. What they say are things in the horror movies. If you don't know Jesus, they're dealing with them in the real life right now. They can't see past the veil. They can't see into the spiritual realm, which I think is the second heaven. So, but if there's anything else you guys want to discuss, let me know real quick. Otherwise, I will call it a night. But, and John, no worries. We disagree on the FE, but you notice, I mean, we'll talk about it as if it's just fact when it comes up, but we don't talk about it much. We don't focus on it. We don't try to make people even believe the way that we do about it. It's just fun to sharpen swords with, the scriptures that we each come up with. But your attitude's gotten a lot better about it, so I greatly appreciate that. Before you were pretty aggressive, and now you're more lighthearted about it, and just really talking about it without being aggressive at all. But I think you see that we're also different than most flat earthers out there on the internet as well. So we got lumped in with them, I think. And we do. You just say that you believe a biblical earth, they lump you in with age flat earthers, so I get it. But I do appreciate you, John. It's been pretty awesome. I was just aggressive. I was depressed. Oh. Well, shit. I didn't know that. That sucks. I've been there. I was a lot younger when I was suicidal. And depressed, I've been there not too long ago. So, I love you, brother. I want you... I want you to know you're loved, but next time you're feeling like that, give me a call. I mean, I'm not anything special, but I'd certainly like to be there for you if at all possible. And that's weird, depressed and suicidal, and then you go aggressive, but it's alright. We all deal with our emotions in a different way. I kind of break down and don't want to talk to anybody. But that's me. But we'll be praying for you, and my heart and prayers with you. And you got my email, and give me your phone number anytime. I'll give you a call. Who are your favorite Ninja Turtle? That's hilarious. That is hilarious. That's showing your age. Purple Donatello. He was my favorite, and I don't know why. I didn't realize that I actually had a favorite until I thought about it. And yes, back then I did have a favorite because he's the one I always drew. He's the one that I dressed up as. He's the one that I pretended to be. But I just pretended, for me, it was like just being part of the whole crew. I didn't realize. So, yes, I emphasized would, and I can actually see, this is how programming works. And this is probably why my daughter runs around the way she does. Because you get sucked into it as if you are the character. And you're doing the things. And you actually, while you're watching it, place yourself as that character. And I was certainly doing that with Donatello. I didn't even think about that till you just said that, Joel. Wow. Yeah, I guess I did have a favorite. It was the one I emulated or just wanted to be. But that's hilarious. That is hilarious. Boys are stupid. Uh, yes, it was one of my favorite. There was something about it. And, I think kids our age, even chicks, girls, got sucked into Saved by the Bell. Dun, dun, dun. I'm saved by the bell. So no, we should have a discussion, a throwback TV, and then do a throwback movie, and then do throwback songs. Okay, see, Smurfs. Yes, the Smurfs, and the things that they hid in the Smurfs was almost as bad as SpongeBob, but SpongeBob's much more blatant nowadays. What more will I say? Right? Um, oh, I watched like all of it back in the day. They did remake it. Huh? Oh, I remember that. I remember that. It flopped on its face. I forgot about that. That's hilarious, Alex. But yes, that's what we'll do. We'll set up on nights like tonight. I didn't have a guest. Didn't know exactly what I was gonna do tonight, and so we're gonna look into a lot of documentaries like we did this evening. Focus on things like that. But then we should also have more of a playful streams and talk about throwback, and maybe even pull up some different things on YouTube, maybe some old jingles and things. See how the world has changed from then till now. Because really, when we were growing up, they did not have such wickedness just open to people. There was out there. It was on VHS, whether it was, whichever route you wanted to go, but it was not being played on 3, 5, and 10. So that would be a fun thing to do for sure. Thunder, thunder, Thundercats. That's hilarious. And yes, I never liked the Smurfs, but I didn't think that I liked it because it was my sister's favorite, and she was always watching it. So, John, you gotta leave them up just a little bit longer because I didn't see what you said. But that's cool. So, we will. It was fun tonight. I hope you guys had a blast. Well, send it to me, John. Send it to me, John. And if it's about some of the things that we're talking about, we'll dive into some things like showing how, Satan is the god of this world, and showing how he's got things interwoven and connected. But tonight was a good introduction to those types of information, because it's more of a realistic. You can really see how this monetary system has been hoodwinked over our eyes from what money really should be, and gives so much validity to the scripture, which, I mean, every word of the Bible is true, but gives validity to the love of money is the root of all evil. So I appreciate you. Old Money Changers Doc. No. No, I'll have to look into that. Something sounds familiar, but I can't. It's ringing a little bell, but not enough for me to spout off what I know. So I'd have to look into it a little bit more. But I thank you. Send me a link, please. So I do appreciate everybody being here. And Debbie, I was about to say, it's good that you're here, sister. Joel, John, Alex, Jason, all you guys, Paula. Who else has been in here tonight? I guess it's just been a little small crowd of people glancing through here. Hash slinging slasher. I should have introduced or welcomed you more. If you end up clicking back, I do apologize, but come back anytime. Be paid. Good to see you. This link needs to be in the description, and it will be Marble Water. I don't think I mentioned you, Alex. Oh, and you know what, Alex and Daryl, and not Alex, but at Alex. Yes, of course you. But I already said hi to you. But Adam. Adam says my dad and granddad were bankers. So this should be pointed out. The banking. They did not adhere to the fractional banking system. And the reason why they were ethics, small town ethics. And they took the hit, and actually they were not creating money out of thin air and wouldn't do it. And that's why that they're probably not bankers anymore, because there's very few banks very few. I mean, I looked it up once before. I wonder if they're still around now. But there was a time when a local bank was not part of the central banking system. So I should have said that earlier, but this is absolutely true. When it became the machine that it is, they put out all the mom and pop places. So that did need to be pointed out. I'm glad I scrolled up, but I hope people saw that. Oh, and Jen, I didn't see you in here. Good to see you, and Brother Dave. Question: do you think the election fraud will be uncovered, and that they will put Trump back in office? And if so, do you think it will spark civil war? Yes, I do think that I have little doubt that Trump will remain in office for the next 4 years. Will it spark a civil war? No, I do not think it'll spark a civil war. I do think that it will put people in the streets and cause bloodshed. But it will be rumors of war. I do think that. But I do not think actually spark civil war. I think that they're just wanting to set the economy up to crash and have us be fighting with each other and not against the powers that be. So let me scroll back down to the bottom. And retracting John, right? It's like, hurry up. Oh, I missed it, John. But yes, much love. So awesome. Well, guys, it was great seeing you tonight. I'm glad you were able to make it, and we will meet again tomorrow night, Lord willing. And like I said, should be another maybe. Tonight we did an open invitation, non-specific. We might do a couple specific open invitations to a few people tomorrow. So we'll see how that goes. But I appreciate you guys for being here, and I pray that it was a blessing to you, and look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. I hope you have a wonderful evening, a better day tomorrow, especially if you've got to go to work, and that it's easy. Not easy as in not productive, but easy as in being able to focus on God more while you're doing it. So, again, appreciate you. Hope you have a wonderful night. Take care. God bless, and good night, everybody.